Hey, this is Jay McAleese coming back to you again with Disc Golf Warehouse. Now that you've learned the terminology, it's time to learn how to build your bag. But first we're going to do a quick review of over what those terms are. The first one I talked about was backhand. As I said, that's pulling it across your body from your hip. Forehand is the other way. It's a flick. For a right-handed backhand player, a forehand or a flick will go to the right, and your backhand will go to the left with an overstable or a stable disc. On those terms, an overstable disc is something that will, if thrown backhand as a right-handed player, will dump really hard to the left. A stable disc will fly straight for a long while and then eventually fade to the left. In an understable disc, you can throw it right-handed backhand and you can get it to go over to the right instead of the left. And then a couple of the angles I talked about. Obviously, you can throw your disc straight or flat. That way, I mean, if you want to just throw your disc and have it do what it's supposed to do, and just get different discs for different shots, you can throw every disc flat. So an overstable disc, you know, is going to go to the left. An understable disc is going to go to the right, etc. But as far as the angles we talked about, the first one was hyzer. If this is the wing of the disc, and if I'm throwing it as a backhand throw, that wing of the disc on the release is going to be facing down. That's going to make the disc go down like that. An anhyzer is the opposite. When you release, the wing is going to be the other way, so it's going to be facing you instead of facing away. And those are a couple of the terms we talked about, which is important to understanding disc golf. So in this video, we're going to talk about flight numbers to understand your discs. Now, flight numbers are everything and also nothing. It'll give you a good overview of what the disc should do. It's not necessarily going to be the exact numbers that you think the disc should be. For example, a lot of the companies that make their discs in altitude, their numbers are going to be a little bit different. I'm down at sea level, and a lot of the companies that make discs that are supposed to be more overstable tend to be more stable down here at sea level. So you're going to notice things like that, but again, it's going to give you a good idea of what the disc should do. If you want a full overview of the disc, I would definitely hit up some of the disc sites where you can buy your discs and read the reviews as well as looking at those flight numbers. We're actually going to do that right now. So now we're on the Infinite Discs website so that I can show you some examples of some flight numbers. This is also a great website if you're looking to buy a disc, but also if you're looking to get a good idea of what a disc is like without throwing it. But if you look down here, on every disc you're going to see a set of 4 different numbers. Discraft lists a 5th, but it's really not that important, I don't think. But these are the 4 numbers that just about every single disc will have on it. The first one is speed, and this is the speed that is required to get the disc to fly the way it's intended to fly. So this disc, you can see the flight path here. You can just tell if you see a disc's flight path like this, and this is thrown, this is a right-hand backhand. If you see it, you know, dip off to the left this quickly, you know it's going to be overstable, but we can determine that based on the flight numbers as well. The next number that you see here is glide, which is a 3, which is in the lower range as far as fairway drivers go. This is a fairway driver, but you're going to see, you know, discs and drivers typically in the range between 6 and 3, and then you're going to have some of your utility discs that have a glide of 2 or even 1. These next 2 numbers are, I think, the most important to understanding a disc, especially if you want to understand how the disc is going to fly as far as finish. So, in determining if it's going to be overstable or understable. So, the first one is turn, and when you throw a disc,
this is the number that's going to indicate how much the disc is going to, if you're throwing it right-handed backhand, how much it's going to turn to the right before fading and finishing to the left. If you've seen somebody throw an amazing shot and it looks like, and they call it an S-line, where they throw it straight and it goes a little bit to the right and then comes back to the left and kind of looks like an S in the air, that disc probably has some turn. So you would see that number here. This number for this disc is in the positives, so typically what that means is it's not going to have any turn. In fact, it's going to have anti-turn, as far as, I don't know what the correct terminology there is, but it's going to be very overstable. The next number you're going to see is fade, and this is how much the disc will fade at the end of its flight. If you take these two numbers, and if you were to add them up, if the numbers end up being positive, it's likely going to be a stable to an overstable disc. If you add these numbers up and they end up being negative, it's typically going to be an understable disc. So I'm going to show you an example real quick of an understable disc, which is the underworld right here. The flight numbers on this are a 7 speed, glide of 6, turn of -3, and fade of 1. If you were to add these two numbers together, you would get -2, which would indicate that it is likely an understable disc. Now again, these numbers are everything and they're also nothing. They just give you a really good idea of what the disc is intended to do, and will give you a good idea of what you're buying, especially if you can't throw it before you buy it. Another thing I like to do to check the flight numbers and kind of get a second opinion on those flight numbers is, if you know what the name of the disc golf manufacturer is that makes the disc that you're thinking about buying, just type that in to Google, then go down to the option with the Infinite Discs website. They really should be paying me for this, but this is really what I do, so I do want to share it. So once the page is loaded, it will show you the entire Westside lineup. So whichever manufacturer you choose, so if you typed Innova and then you went to the Infinite Discs option in Google, you just click on that and it'll show you the whole lineup. But what I really like about this is, and we're going to look at the Underworld again, is it gives you another idea of what the flight number or the flight characteristics of this disc is. So people are able to review the discs on this website and give their own flight numbers. And so the numbers that you see right here is the average of all of those flight numbers that the reviewers had given. So if you remember, the original, the flight numbers that were given by Westside Discs for the Underworld was a speed of 7, glide of 6, turn of -3, and then a fade of 1. Based on the reviews, it looks like this disc is not as understable as advertised. So, this for me would be helpful if I was looking for a disc and I needed to be understable, but I thought the Underworld, based on the numbers, might be too understable. I can look at this and be like, okay, well, it might not be as understable as I thought. I can also click on the details, and this is the page we were on before, but if you scroll down, you can read the reviews, and if somebody reviewed it as being different than the flight characteristics, you can read what they had to say about it, and see, make a very educated decision on your disc purchase based on all of that information. I know it's a little blurry. I don't have a shorter lens, but the flight numbers are listed on this Envy. This is a putter as 3302. But you're going to see a lot of discs where it's listed out in a row of 4 numbers like this. And again, this is speed, this is glide, this is turn, and this is fade. And to determine if a disc is going to be overstable or understable without throwing it, and again, these numbers aren't everything, they're going to give you an idea. You look at the turn and the fade, and if you add these together and there ends up being more fade than there is turn,
then it's generally going to be overstable or stable. This one I would consider to be in the stable to overstable range with a turn of 0 and a fade of 2. So now that we've talked about the different flight numbers, I'm going to walk you through how to set up your bag. I think the first two most important things you can do for your bag is, and what I'm showing you right here are two different putters. The first one is your approach disc, and then the second one that I'm holding up now is your putter. Because you will use these the most on the disc golf course, I think these are the most important discs in your bag, and understanding and throwing and enjoy throwing. The approach shot you need a lot of confidence in on the disc golf course. Now we're going to start on the throwing putters. That is an example of a very overstable putting putter. This is my go-to stable driving putter. And then what I'm going to show next right here is it's the same disc, but it's been thrown a lot, so it's beaten in. And when a disc beats in, it slowly goes, it loses stability, so it goes in the direction of understability. So that one has lost some of its stability, so it's filled in to the understable slot. Now we're going to talk about our mid-ranges here. And I'm going from left to right, left being the most overstable to the right being the least overstable. And so I'm starting here. Those two essentially are the same flying disc. It's just an overstable mid-range. The second one, the pink one, is more stable because it has been beat in over time. That orange one is my go-to. It is stable but not understable. And then the last one I showed you is a truth, which is a stable mid-range, but it's so old that it's become understable. And this is an example of, if I were to lose my truth, I could throw that understable mid-range in there instead. Now we're going to move on to our fairway drivers. This is a very overstable, this is the Felon. We looked at the flight numbers earlier. It's very overstable, but it's a very good utility disc. And this is stable to overstable. If I need to forehand something straight, or if I need to backhand something without it dumping off, that's what I'll use. And then this is a Felon as well, but it's old, and it's been beat in, so it's very stable. And these next two are my stable to understable discs. These are both Fission Volts, but I got them in a lighter weight so that they would be less stable. And then the pink one I've had for a long time, and it has become understable. And next we're going to move on to the distance drivers here. We're going to start with the most overstable. That's an Axiom Defy. If there's a really strong headwind and I need to know that a forehand is not going to flip over, that's what I'll throw. And then next, these are my two base distance drivers here. They're both Giants. One is newer than the other. That lighter blue one is older, so it's going to be a little straighter. That's a Sword. It is a stable to understable distance driver. And then I have the Wave, which that's max weight. So it flies very similar to that Sword, just kind of dead straight. And then that one's a lighter Wave, so it's going to be understable. I can throw some rollers with. And that's just the basic setup of my bag. You can also add other utility discs. So this Stall, that is more overstable than my most overstable disc. So if I need something even beefier, I can throw that in there. Before I finish this video up, there's a couple more things I do want to mention to help y'all build your bag. If you haven't watched Danny Lindahl's video, he's with Dynamic Discs, so if you go to their YouTube channel, go watch that. I based a lot of how I set up my bag based on the information I got on that, and then there's a lot of outside information that I picked up as well. But if you want to set up your bag, there's 3 discs you need to build around, which is an overstable mid-range, a stable, and an understable mid-range. So when looking at this picture, you look in the middle, that pink Verdict there, that is my overstable mid-range. Next to that is the orange Warship, that is my stable mid-range, and then next to that is my stable to understable mid-range, which is a beat-in truth. Everything else is built off around that. With those 3 discs, you should be able to throw just about every shot. Another thing to mention is as you move up from putters to distance drivers, there's a reason why people bag more drivers than they do putters or mid-ranges. It's because as you move up from putter to driver to distance driver, there is more variation in the flight path. So, you know, at the very top with 6 discs, the one on the very right, that white one, is a wave. I can throw a roller with that one. And then all the way to the left is a super overstable distance driver that I can always trust in the wind. So there's a lot of variation there. You're going to see variation in every disc. And another thing that I like to talk about is, and it's super important, when you're setting up your bag, try out a bunch of different putters for putting. Make sure it is very comfortable in your hand. Think about it in different seasons, whether it be summer or winter. Regarding grip, so I actually had to switch putters because I really liked my putter in the summer. It was grippy, but when winter came around, it became slick. And so I needed to get something with a little bit more grip, so I switched. And I actually switched to something that when summer came back around, the discs became too hot and they became kind of floppy. So that interfered with my putt in the summer. So I finally found that middle ground of putter that is grippy, but is not too grippy. It's just kind of the perfect feel for what I was looking for. And everybody's hand and feel is different. So definitely try a lot of different putters out. I right now am putting with the Castaplas, and I always say it wrong, the Rico. And then my approach disc, which I spent a very long time trying to find something like this, is a Berg. If you've never thrown one, they're very unique. It's like throwing a bottle cap, but it's a speed of 1, glide of 1, turn of 0, and fade of 2. So it requires almost nothing for it to get up to speed, and it's not going to turn over. So I can throw some really nice touch forehand upshots, and then I can do more of an ultimate disc fan grip on the disc for my backhand approaches, and know that I don't have to rip it to get it to go where I need it to go. I don't have to use a power grip. I can use a modified fan grip. And we'll talk about grips in another video, but you know, just try out a bunch of different discs. And then when we're looking at the discs from left to right, when you're filling up your bag, you want to think about different courses and different shots that you want to throw, and then fill those holes in your bag with different discs. So an example of this that I have here is in my fairway drivers. I have my most overstable Felon, which is the Metal Flake Felon, and then I have the Longbowman, which is a little bit more stable, and then the really old beat-in Felon, which is very just regularly stable because of how much use it's had. So after that's the Captain American Stamp Felon. After I started throwing it for a while, it beat in, and then a while longer it started to turn over with my forehands. So I needed to fill in that slot with something that was less overstable than a brand new Felon, but was more overstable than my beat-in one. So I threw in that Longbowman to fill that slot. Another thing that I like to talk about when you're making your bag is make it as simple as possible. Try to use as little variation in the molds you throw as possible so you can get used to those. And then as those wear and beat in, you can filter in new ones instead of having a bag with a bunch of different discs and you step up to the tee pad and you are just really unsure of what you should be throwing. Try to keep it as simple as possible. Mine looks a little hodgepodge.
But if you look at my mid-ranges, that Warship and that Truth, they're very similar discs, and that Vertic and that Bobcat are very similar in the way they fly. The Bobcat's just newer, so it's more overstable, and the Truth is older, so it's going to be less stable than that Warship. So keep it as simple as possible. Stick to the discs that you like, and just enjoy the bag that you have and feel confident going to the course.